Well, I know that many of you have been following along with the Old Testament study in the consecutive or chronological Bible, but you'll find that if you go to my channel and you go back several months, you'll see that I have covered everything else in the Old Testament when I was going backwards from the book of Revelation. So I'm not going to repeat some of the same things that I said just a few months ago as we were going backwards in the chronological Bible from the book of Revelation backwards. We're going to start the New Testament now, and I think that's appropriate. I think we've been in the Old Testament long enough for a while, and I'm going to try to follow the chronological Bible, but I already found a problem as I looked at the four gospel accounts, which are next chronologically. They're not exactly chronological as far as I'm concerned, because we need to know where John came from and the promise of his birth before we actually look at John announcing the coming of the Messiah. So let me give you some reading assignments if you are wanting to go through chronologically with me. We may not follow the chronological Bible exactly, but we'll try to stay as close to it as we can and add in things that we need to add in. So let me give you some reading assignments. It's Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. And there we find the genealogy of Jesus all the way back as God promised the Messiah would come from this lineage. And we have a parallel passage in Luke chapter 3, verses 23 and following. So you have two genealogies that give us God's promise of a Messiah coming. His promise that he would be from the house of David, that he would be the lineage of David, and very, very important to know that God is faithful to his promises. The second reading assignment is chapter 1, verses 1 through 8 of the book of Mark, Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. And there we again find a prophecy fulfilled. Isaiah promises there would be a forerunner to Jesus, and he would bring good news that the Messiah was coming. And I think that that's a very important reading as well. And then at the third reading I would ask you to look at is Luke chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, which I'm going to read to you in just a moment. But I want you to look at it and meditate on it. And finally, John chapter 1, verses 1 through 14. And the very critical passage of Scripture, because it deals with some very strong doctrine, and that is that Jesus was God in the flesh. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And down to verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I think it's very, very important to understand that Jesus was all man and he was all God. He was man in body form from his mother Mary, but he was all God because of the Holy Spirit coming upon her and the virgin birth. Important doctrine, and I hope that you will read through that carefully and recognize what important doctrine that is. If I were going to preach a message on this first section of study, I would probably preach either God's promises are faithful and true, based on the prophecy and fulfillment in the lineage of David, or I might preach a message that would be even more uplifting, which is He is coming. That is the prophecy that John the Baptist would actually introduce to us, the Messiah, after 400 silent years, after so much history. We have finally the appearance of the Messiah. He is coming by the prophecy of John and through Isaiah and all the way back to the Old Testament and the lineage of David. So let me read to you why I think that one of the most important passages in today's reading for the Bible is from Luke chapter 1, verse 1 and through 4. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to complete an account of the things accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the Word, that is Jesus, the Word, have handed them down to us. It seemed fitting to me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning to write it out for you in consecutive order. Most excellent Theophilus, so that you might know, let me repeat that, verse 4, so that you might know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. Well, Luke is a doctor, we all know that. We know that he actually traveled probably a number of missionary trips with Paul. We know that he had a great relationship with Peter. We know that he had a Greek mindset, as the Gospel of Luke would indicate. And we know that God has inspired the words that we've just read, that Luke didn't want us to have any mistaking about this being a fable or a fairy tale, but rather he says what we've had from eyewitnesses. I've investigated everything thoroughly and carefully from the beginning, and I'm now going to try to write it out in consecutive order. In other words, Luke seems to be one of the ones that wants to write a chronological account of Jesus' life, so that you might know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. That's incredible, isn't it? That you might know the exact truth. Wonderful thing that we have such credibility as God has inspired the scripture writers, that we might know, based on eyewitnesses and careful investigation, the things that Jesus did, who he was, what he did, and why it's so important to us. And that's my thought for the day. Take some time to read this and meditate on it, to think about how significant these first words in these four Gospels really are. The Gospel of John, that Jesus was God in the flesh, all God, all man, and that he came so that he could make a perfect sacrifice for you and for me. God bless you and have a wonderful day.